Today's video is going to look and sound a little different. Not really going to do any forecasting, presenting of weather information. I wanted to talk in general about the state of the weather industry and specifically the social media, internet, weather independent, whatever this is, weather industry. And I'm going to start off with an apology. In last night's video, at the end, I shared a weather map, weather model, about 15 days in advance. And that is something I swore when I started this channel I wouldn't get into, I wouldn't do. And I did make it very clear, like, you shouldn't trust this. This likely won't be the case. It won't happen. But I did it anyway. I fell victim to something that caught my eye, I thought was interesting. I wanted to share it. Hey, look at me. I have the power to see the future. And I think a lot of internet weather YouTubers fall into that trap. And it's a great way to get a discussion going, to get comments, get views, likes, grow your channel, all that stuff. And I set out with the purpose of being not that kind of YouTube weather channel. So I apologize. I'll do my best to avoid that into the future. I'm not one to, do a hype cast, as they like to call it. And I'm always going to be as honest and transparent with you as I can. So with that said, I wanted to talk a little bit more in general about weather models, weather analysts, as they like to call themselves. I like to call myself a weather interpreter on these videos. I'm more or less relaying the information that I have shifted through and feel is pertinent to those of you watching. And this channel is primarily focused on Iowa weather, so if you are new here, understand that's where most of these videos are going to be centered as. But for this video anyway, we're going to have a general conversation and discussion about weather on the internet. So, first of all, I don't want to turn this into a lecture or a big lesson, but I wanted to talk about weather maps and weather models. You see, I think it was 2 years ago, I had this epiphany that the Storm Prediction Center, like the premier experts on severe weather, and I'm not questioning that by any means, but I would see in their convective outlooks, their forecast, changes that I saw in the models ahead of their updates. And when that clicked to me, I was like, huh. Like the best of the best is looking at the same information that's free and publicly available as I am. The difference is their experience and their education, their knowledge, and their ability to interpret that information to create their own forecast. They are meteorologists. I am not. I'm a weather enthusiast. I've been storm chasing for over 20 years, and I've been observing the weather since, with any regularity, 5th grade, even though my interest started a few years before that. And if we're doing the math, that's a really long time. But there are TikTokers and YouTubers and Facebook accounts that will take what is an actual piece of real data, a real model, and they'll misinterpret it, deliver it under false pretenses, make it into something that it shouldn't be. And it's especially prevalent this time of year when we start looking at winter storms and especially like snowfall totals. I can remember a few years ago, my brother-in-law texted me. He's like, sent me an image. He's like, is this true? Is this going to happen? And it was saying something like 19 to 24 inches of snow up where he lived in northern Iowa. And it was actually only like a few days out. And I said, well, that is a real model. Now, it could have been photoshopped, and nowadays, who knows what AI generation can do to all this. I said, it's a real model, but in reality, no, that's not going to happen. Is this way out of whack? If you looked at the temperatures are going to be pretty high during that time. So there's just other things you have to trust. If you're watching TV, your TV meteorologist, and there are some meteorologists that have their own YouTube channels now. And if you think of Max Velocity, he's grown tremendously this last half year, really. And he's in school to be a meteorologist. Kudos to him. I never went that route because I'm terrible at algebra and calculus. That's really what kept me from pursuing meteorology as a profession, we'll say. And here I am, almost turning 40. I'm still out there storm chasing. I'm still doing the things I wanted to do. I'm just, not doing research. I'm not a degreed meteorologist, not working for a television station, that sort of thing. And that's a good part of why I do this channel and my storm chasing channel. YouTube's enabled me to do something that 20 years ago was impossible. So that's why I do this. Getting back on track. Weather maps, weather models, you really have to be cautious nowadays. Especially if we look at the hurricanes that have happened this season. There have been just complete nut jobs out there talking about weather maps and, being weather psychics and all this bullshit. And just, if you're someone that wants to believe that, you're going to believe it no matter what I say. But don't allow yourself to buy into the excitement, the what ifs, the possibilities. A more exciting forecast is going to get more views than a boring forecast. It just comes down to that. The best thing you can do is recognize it, not buy into it, and try to just follow the ones that are trying to do an honest job. If we think of internet YouTubers, the biggest one of them all is Ryan Hall. He has done something incredible with his channel. He's even got a 24/7 live stream now that is automated with, I think, AI or at least a bot of some kind that feeds off of the questions that people ask in the chat. It's incredible. He is eating the Weather Channel's lunch right now. And if you think of him and Max Velocity, their popularity has just taken off and they're doing a great job. But when Ryan Hall started, I kind of really didn't like him. I thought he was being too much of the clickbaity hypecast kind of guy, just doing whatever he can to get views. And it worked, but if you'd actually go in and listen to his message, he wasn't inflating things or, trying to do things that would basically amount to a flat out lie to the public. And, I think he's toned down his thumbnails now. They're actually, both he and Max's are very generic. It's just like, look at this. Wow. Big storm, whatever. I'm not here to criticize. It's working for him. But there are others, and I'm not going to name names because they have a reputation of actually like sabotaging and attacking you. But there are channels out there, like I said before, are just feeding you bullshit. And just please don't feed into it. Don't comment, don't like, don't share, just block and ignore. And I know it's very hard to, if you don't have any experience with this, know what is true, what's not. Are they interpreting things faithfully or just putting whatever they can out there to get those views and ultimately the ad revenue that comes with it. So I just want to go over a few things. This isn't going to be a long lecture, and we can definitely do videos that go more in depth. But here, I just want to show you, and this is just one site, Pivotal Weather. I like the interface. It's easy to navigate. To get some of the things I look at, you do have to pay a subscription for, which I do. Some channels don't. They just rip it off and use it as their own. I do have a commercial license to use this. But listed here are forecast models. And if we start over, draw tool here. On this channel, we will primarily look at the global and the convection allowing or convective allowing models, or CAMs, as they're referred to. Ensembles, I should get into more, I just haven't. They're basically like a combination of models, with the idea that averaging things out, more likely to have a more accurate forecast. So, and again, I want to preface, I'm not a meteorologist, I'm not trained in this, I'm self-taught. I'm going to be, though, fully honest with you what I do know about them and what I don't. That's the key. Two that you'll see me often mention is the European model and the GFS, basically NOAA, the American model. Those are good for temperature, longer range forecast, precipitation, and just a good overall picture of what's happening with the weather on a global scale. They're a global model. And then as we get closer to an event, we'll look generally at the NAM3K, and for severe weather, I'm partial to the HRRR. It's kind of interesting. This last year, the NAM3K, it's an older model. Some were saying, it's on its way out, was actually forecasting severe weather events better than the HRRR, which I felt did a much better job in 2023. It's interesting how that works. A little tidbit, the RRFSA, or Rufus, as we like to say, that is scheduled to replace the HRRR here at some point. And a lot of these NSL models are also, and SSL models are also slated to be the primary ones, but they're still fresh and new, and just came to the site this last year anyway. But those generally are the 4 or 5 models we're going to look at the most. The RAP and the regular NAM may look at a little bit as well. Also, there's something called resolution. So basically, the model, as you get into the convective allowing models, they have a higher resolution. So they'll look and pinpoint every square kilometer, versus your global models are much larger. I don't know if they're maybe 5 kilometer, 10 kilometer resolution. So don't quote me on that. I might be wrong, but that's another reason they don't go out as far, because there's just a lot of information, and it's a lot of detail trying to get that pinpoint. Was a better word than resolution, that accuracy on those models. And it's scary, like sometimes they are so accurate, they will predict a tornado looking supercell to the hour, to the county, and just be spot on. And the next time they could say we're going to have a huge line of storms, and then nothing happens. So, that goes back to the experience and the interpretation part, and understanding a little bit of the nuance of the models, and just combining it with what you're seeing with actual observations. And that brings me to another key point that you should know. When you look at a weather map, there are essentially 2 kinds. There's an observed and a forecast. Observed means it has happened or is happening. If you think of things like satellite and radar, as long as they're not like the future cast products, that's observed information. If you look at a sounding that was gathered at any number of the National Weather Service stations, where they send up a balloon and actually measure the atmosphere, that's an observed sounding. And then the forecast is what we're looking at here, things that are generated by computers. And to think that they can even be just somewhat accurate is pretty amazing, that they're taking all these data samples, from commercial airlines, the observed soundings from the radiosondes, the balloons that go up and collect that atmospheric data. You have satellite radar. I'm not a physicist or a meteorologist. I'm not the one that built these products. I'm just here to look at them and apply them to my experience. So, first thing you should know, observed forecast. Now, if we look at the actual maps, there's only 2 words I want you to take away from today's video. And just for fun, this is the updated model of that storm I had mentioned in yesterday's video. So we are looking at the European right now. And there's 2 words that you're going to see, and hopefully they're not photoshopped, not AI generated, and the person that's presenting them is at least not fudging the details. But be mindful of the valid time and the initiated or initialized, I'm not sure which, same difference. So valid is the map is showing what is happening at that time. The initialized is when this model was generated, when the map was created, not showing what it will look like. That's the valid time. And on some maps, they might be reverse. The initialized might be on the left and the valid on the right. Just know that valid is showing what is forecasted to be at that time. So if we're looking at this, we can see that it's going to be December 17th. And maybe we'll get into this to another time, but it's showing the time in Zulu hours. It's a universal time. So 12Z in Iowa is the same as 12Z in New York, same as 12Z in Moscow and Sydney. It's 12Z everywhere. This is the weather and this would be 6 a.m. Central Standard Time on Tuesday, December 17th. Now, if it were the summer, it would actually be 7 a.m. because of daylight savings time here in Iowa. So this map then, this model was generated today the 3rd at 6 a.m. Or at least was published at that time. It was probably being generated in the hour leading up to that time, or hours. Some models generate every hour, some every 6 hours, different variables there. But key takeaway is that not every map will show this, but you can also see that this is 336 hours out. And that's the key. People will show weather maps that show a storm or snowfall totals just way too far out in advance than what they should. And this again is what I apologize for doing in the last video. Weather is very hard to predict. Give your TV meteorologist a break. Even knowing when and how much snow is going to fall 24 hours in advance can be very, very difficult to get right. Just give everyone that's doing this honestly some grace. Meteorologists, people in the weather industry, whatever, they talk a lot about being the most accurate. Channel, not to pick on them, but Channel 5 here in Des Moines, they have this independent study or whatever that says they've been the most accurate 7 years in a row. And I don't know what that means. Maybe they were better at forecasting the high temperature every day by a degree. Maybe they were better at saying this day would rain, this day wouldn't. And I don't know if they're talking about just Des Moines, the whole of central Iowa. I don't know what the metrics are. But that shouldn't be the objective, the mission of anyone in the weather industry, meteorologist, myself. It's not to be the most accurate, but to prepare others. And to do it in a way that is honest and ethical. You know, I could say it's going to storm and be Armageddon every week. So you need to be prepared every week. Well, people are going to not trust what you're going to say if you're going to be wrong all the time. So I get there is a place there to be accurate, but I'm not going to split hairs with you if the high tomorrow is going to be, 34 or 37. Maybe that's a bad example because that can have implications on whether it snows or rains and that. If it's 56 or 59, not generally a huge deal to most people. And if I say, or your TV meteorologist says it's going to be a 60% chance of rain, that means 6 out of 10 days, given conditions like this, it's going to rain. They're not saying it is going to rain, but to be prepared for it. And I'm sure that's common sense for the majority of you. Maybe you've never thought of it that way. But again, just go back and give your TV meteorologist, anyone you're watching on YouTube, again, as long as you're being honest, give them some grace. We're all looking at the same information. We're doing our best to interpret it, taking our experience, our knowledge, our education, and trying to present it to those who don't have that background. So it's great to be accurate, but the important thing to understand is we're trying to prepare you. Ryan Hall is famous for saying, don't be scared, be prepared. Same idea. So if you're looking at this map, you'd probably bet me that we're going to have a pretty good winter storm here coming up in a few weeks. It's going to be raining in Des Moines, it's going to be icing there in Waterloo, Decorah, Dubuque, and then heavy wet snow in Wisconsin. It's going to happen, right? Well, this is the European model. What if I showed you the GFS model? We're looking at the same time, Tuesday morning, 6 a.m., 17th of December. Model run this morning, 6 a.m. Well, look at the Midwest. Look at that high pressure. It's clear skies, settled weather, maybe some light snow flurries up there near the Canadian border. But that same storm that was centered, we presume the same storm, maybe not, a storm that was centered over northwest Iowa is all the way up here, closer to Greenland than Iowa, way up there in Canada. So, which one are you going to bet on? At this point, your guess is as good as mine. So, last time I'll say it. Be cautious of who you follow. Be mindful of the maps you're being shown. And if it sounds really outlandish, like it's, I don't want to say too good, but too extreme to be true, it's probably not. As a good rule of thumb, weather models are good 3 days out. They're decent at 5, but after that, anything can happen. So, I hope this has been somewhat informative. I hope you take away my thoughts and ruminate on them for a little bit, and appreciate what myself and others are trying to do with videos like this, and everyone working, at your local news channel all the way up to the weather channel. Yeah, the stations want to turn a profit. The big networks want to turn a profit. They're going to hype things up. That's what sells. That's what gets eyeballs. That's what sells ads. And I think that's where channels like this one and Ryan Hall and, just a few of the ones that are trying to be honest and straightforward with you are really going to take the lion's share of viewership going forward. So I know this has been a long one, maybe a little long-winded. Thank you for hanging in there. If you're in Iowa, consider subscribing. I'm going to talk about the weather more often here during the winter and as we get into severe weather season coming up this spring. So, till the next video, thanks for watching.